All right, guys, I'm back to answer some asks and talk about some things that have been sent to me. We're just going to jump right in. Um, well, let's read this first. Saw this being passed around the dark ship like a major point was being scored here. Thought it was very funny in light of the breakdown you did about the connections between Spain and spaghetti westerns. Google is still free. Very easy to look up more on the topic for people like OOP to figure out what's going on for themselves, too. Obviously, some people are just looking for things to be offended by, but damn. Society reverted to a pre-modern technology era after the end of the world. Shocking. Next, they'll be mad that there's sand depicted in deserts. Okay, what are they saying? Could you, dear Anglos, explain to me why the post-apocalyptic Spain of this shabby zombie universe seems cosplayed from the twisted vision that Americans have of Mexico and straight out of a folklorized version of the 1930s Spain? Um, yeah, because that's pretty much what they're going for. That's that's purposeful, and it's because that's how they imagine that Spain would look in the apocalypse after everything has happened. So, yeah, I agree with your analysis here. Yeah, and maybe I ought to pair this with something else that was sent to me, and I'm not going to read the entire thing. Hold on. So we have this EW article. And it's worth a read. I will put it in the show notes. And the reason that I'm bringing it up now is because the Dark Ship was also passing this around, and they're really kind of losing their mind over it. I'm not going to read a couple of the posts that were sent to me that were posted by the Dark Ship. Honestly, it's not anything different than we've seen before. It's them thinking that they're really hating on Norman and saying everything's his fault, and that he's ruining the show and that he's in charge of everything. But really, this is just them talking about that same line from this last episode where Valentina asked if Daryl and Carol had ever hooked up, and he said nope. Okay, so this is them talking about it. Um, so here it is. No, we're not really, never. And then Daryl can't help himself and leans his head in for emphasis as he tacks on a big nope before walking away. So it talks about how there are certain fans who have wanted them to get together. Oops. This is Melissa McBride weighing in. So you guys can go read this, but this is the part that they really hated. And Norman says, we've never implied that we were a couple in 16 years. You have fans who just want to see this one thing, and if you give it to them, it's done forever. We've really tried our hardest to take the show and make it original and make it less about zombie jump scares and who's going to hook up with who. Regis points out that going down this road of serving every fan whim instead of the story itself is a slippery slope. You can't really write for YouTube comments, he notes. You just can't. There are also other YouTube comments that are like, when's Daryl gonna find Rick? Like, I don't know, but if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. But in the case of what just aired on TV, readers can understand the confusion. The character of Valentina, Tina, she's very sexually free. She assumes everyone is hooking up. So it was just, like I said, it was just more of the same. And I just kind of had to laugh and facepalm about some of the things they were saying. They're once again thinking that he is running the show. And I'm kind of a broken record saying this, but it's very, not everybody understands how a business is run, and not hating on anyone for not understanding that, but you probably shouldn't go around proclaiming that you understand when you really don't. Because for anybody who does know how things run, they're just flaunting their own ignorance about it. Like it just sounds ridiculous, the things that they are implying. Like they even almost implied that Norman hired Gimple or something. And it's like, no, Gimple is his boss. Like most people don't hire their own boss. Like those people and him and Zabel would have been hired by the studio. You know what I mean? But it's just like these ridiculous claims that they're making. And um, I do think it's interesting. One thing that I do want to point out here is he says that we've never implied that we were a couple in 16 years. And of course, the Dark Ship is going to disagree with that. But one thing that I notice, and that this really kind of brought up for me, is that there's a lot of people who like to think and like to say that things are happening off screen that we just aren't seeing yet. And we have seen that with the Dark Ship. One in particular that I remember is back in season 7 when Carol went to live alone in that cabin, and then Daryl showed up on her doorstep and they hugged and had a reunion, and he was there and had dinner with her, and then he left. So many of the Dark Ship were saying that, the two of them had sex in the cabin and we just didn't see it. Now, of course, we never believed that. We were going, yeah, you're really reaching there, but I think it's important to note that I think even people in our fandom like to do this. Oh, well, there was stuff that we just didn't see. And, of course, it's a byproduct of the missing 17 days. And obviously, I do think that they skipped over the missing 17 days, and that's something we're going to see. But there's a ton of evidence for that. We have evidence of them filming that. We have, references to it, like with the white church uh, trading card. We have a lot of evidence. So when there's obvious evidence of it like that, that's one thing. But I do think people take it too far, and will take a scene that um, we don't have any evidence that there's anything extra there and just assume there's something extra there because they want it to be there, right? So all I'm saying is, yeah, I get that it's very it's hard you can't really be black and white about it because there are some things that they clearly did skip over and there's no way to prove things one way or the other. But this is just to say we need to not go overboard with that. If there isn't clear evidence that they've skipped over something, then they probably didn't, and it's probably not coming back. So just something to keep in mind. But anyway, I will put this in the show notes and just know that this is kind of being passed around. And obviously that, different shippers are angry about it, but I think it's great. I think it's, he says we've never implied that they were a couple in 16 years. I've always said that at the beginning of season 3, they really shut down the idea of Daryl and Carol. And I don't think they necessarily implied that they were going to go anywhere with them before that, but they just were aware of the fans and the shippers. So that was them shutting it down. And this is Norman just confirming this. They were aware of the theories and aware of the shippers, but they were never really planning to do anything with them romantically. So anyway, just more confirmation. So thank you for sending that in. Granny TWD, referencing Carol's brown eye. I noticed in the poster that Norman defaced. Daryl's eye is brown. Maybe it's just the color palette they're using for Spain or something more interesting. Yeah, that's true. We could be looking too much into it. So if you don't know what that is, there was something, I believe Norman put it on his social media, and it might have been a story, so I don't know if it's there anymore. But he found yeah, a poster that was, of him that was, for the Daryl Dixon. It was a promotion, and he like put a mustache on it and was just goofing around with it. But she's saying that that had Daryl's eyes being brown. So it really could just be them trying to, use a continuous palette for the mood or something because everything is very brown and tan in Spain. So yeah, you could be right. You very well could be right about the color. We'll just have to see if anything comes of it. So thank you. Daryl learns sign language for Connie, but they never end up together. Would it be possible that somehow Beth ends up deaf or mute? Well, maybe both, and that's how she communicates now, and it will come up later, or is it too far-fetched? Um, Personally, I don't think she's going to end up mute. I just think that would be too complicated to have them communicate on screen that way. But I do think it's possible that she'll know sign language. So it could be that she is a little bit deaf, or it could just be that, like him, she knows somebody who is deaf and so learned sign language so that she could communicate with them. And I think that would be cool if she knew sign language because it would be another way in which they could communicate. So I do hope they're going somewhere with that. But I don't know for sure. And I really don't think that she'll be deaf and mute such that she can't communicate any other way because I don't think that would work very well for their story. But we'll see. And I do hope that she knows sign language because that would be just kind of a cool secret way that they could communicate and add another layer to things. So I hope so. It's interesting that we've had our first character ever ask Daryl and Carol outright if they're a couple or have ever been intimate. I don't recall anyone ever asking them outright. Kind of crazy that it's been brought up only now. Either they're playing up to the two, finally realizing they're into each other, as my friend said, LOL, or they're trying to establish a boundary or something. I'm not worried about them becoming that way, but it's very strange to me. Yeah, I think it's just more of them shutting it down. Yeah, I guess it is a boundary, but it's very much them because I think it's important that it's not just. So I think it was very intentional the way that they worded this because it wasn't just, are you a couple now? Valentina specifically said, you've never. And he said, nope. And so that's also a way of shutting down anything in the past, right? Like I said before, they've never done anything off screen. They've never made out that we haven't seen, nothing like that. It's never been that way. And that's a big deal. You're right. That is a really big deal for them to do that. But I think that the reason they're doing it now is because they need to shut that down before he finally meets his love interest. Before they were willing to let it slide and willing to let people believe what they wanted because they weren't actually giving him his love interest yet, right? In all the past seasons. But the fact that they're doing it now shows that they are. And they need to shut that down so that there's absolutely no question about it before they bring in whoever his, going forward love interest is going to be. And we all know who I think it will be, right? So, yeah, I think it's, really just trying to shut everything down, the idea that it ever could be or ever was, and all of that. So yeah, but it is really interesting and it is a really big deal. Oh, okay. This is something that was sent to me from Norman's social media. He's driving in his car and he holds up this that says Daryl needs a lover. Again, clearly, just him goofing around, but also real that's a kind of a big deal. That's a strong statement for Norman to be posting that. Much like you said, Nani, that they haven't shut down Daryl and Carol outright or asked them outright if they've been together before and now they're doing this. At the same time, they're really hinting about the love interest for him. And that's not news to us. Like we've known since the beginning of season 1 of Daryl Dixon that that's where they were headed, that this spinoff was going to be about that. But still, it's a big deal. He's being quite obvious in posting that on social media. So thanks to Anani Bonnie 44 for sending me that. All right, you guys, a little bit shorter today. I was just looking through everything, and I think that's all I have for now. But by the time this post will only be a day or so, a day maybe two, away from the next episode. So yeah, I hope everybody is having a good week, and I look forward to the new episode on Sunday, and I will be back then. See you then.